Well, the idea of going back started some time ago. We wanted to tell the story, and we became convinced that an essential, fundamental part of that story is where it began, in Madeira.
It's kind of a mystique. It's kind of exotic. It's a volcanic island. It's in the middle of the Atlantic, off the coast of Africa. It's beautiful.
Goosebumps, I think, would be the first thing that came to mind. It was unbelievable to see the land for the first time.
I kind of just think of it as the homeland, I guess. I think we went back to kind of bring it full circle. I think that's where it started, and that's where we need to get a checkup on where we're at 100 years later. It also makes you really appreciate the beauty of Madeira, the beauty of the people, the culture.
Well, retracing his steps definitely was a different approach to the trip. That was my 6th time that I've had the chance to go to Madeira, and it was certainly the most unique time. I saw things there on this trip I never even knew existed. I did not know the house that he grew up in was still standing. And on this trip, I got to stand in front of it. I got to see it. I got to see the beach area where we are pretty sure that he would go swimming every morning. We found out where the original market was. So the church in the font where he was baptized, those were things I'd never seen before.
After seeing all that, even in the modern world in 2024, I think it would take a lot of courage for a young teenager to leave and do that and start a new life.
I'm just so glad we were able to all go back and see it together as a company and as a family. But it's our history, right? It's the American success story. So of course, it holds a special place in my heart.
You know, when you're there and you're seeing all the different scenery and how unique the island, how different the northern part is from the southern part, the villages and all the small towns and the food, it's just like, it's special because you kind of you feel like you're in his shoes. You know, I know it's a lot different than what it was when he was living there in the early 1900s, you know.
Yeah, so it was just this thing that was in my past, and but going there and made face-to-face connection with people I've been talking to over the last few years really made it a special trip, and made me proud to be Portuguese, but more importantly, Madeiran.
Meeting, you know, the cousins, I know a few of them by name, and we've kept in touch, but not spending a good chunk of time with them. And so the night that we had where we gathered and Rui had his birthday celebration and a lot of, you know, great-grandchildren of my great-grandfather's brothers, you know, that stayed on the island and just, you know, what they're interested in. So that was special.
Henrietta Nobrega, as school teacher, selected 2 of her sons to leave Madeira and live in the new country of America, where they could become doctors with the help and promise of her brothers Paul and John Baptiste, who already lived in the United States. Frank was older and landed in 1914 in Boston, where his uncle Paul lived. He engaged in multiple and varied work opportunities and completed his high school education, including a year of college. Thereafter, he went to Kansas City, where Uncle John offered him a job as a salesman in his chemical company. Ferd came to the United States in 1920 at age 18 and also landed in Boston, but spent a short time with his Uncle Paul. Ferd soon joined his brother Frank in Kansas City. Ferd had worked in Madeira as a pharmacist and was familiar in mixing and dealing with chemicals.
And he was more the formulator and blender and did the inside of the company. And my grandfather was doing the sales and took on the overall management. My great uncle, John Baptiste, and my grandfather, who was working as a salesman for him, had a falling out over commissions and was not being treated well. My grandfather didn't believe, and so he left. His mother-in-law, my grandmother's mother, and my grandmother was from Ireland, and her sister, who married Ferdinand, so brothers married sisters, said, Frank, why don't if you're worth this much to your uncle, then you're worth that much to yourself. Why don't you borrow $500 from me and start your own company? And she convinced my grandfather to do it.
As a result, Frank established the new chemical business in January 1925, in which he was to be the organizer, director, and salesman of the company, and Ferd was to work in the plant making the products.
His first order on January 2nd, the Washington Hotel, and this was for floor oil. Back then, everything was wood floors. It'd get really dusty. They would use floor oil to keep the dust down and keep it looking nice.
His mother-in-law ended up passing away, but he paid back the estate with interest, and that's how it all started. So it was a small business. I think the legend is they started in the basement of a brothel and would go out. My grandfather go out and get the order. They'd come back. My Uncle D, Ferd, would make it, and they would roll the barrel up onto the lawn, roll it around for the blending process, put it on the truck and deliver it.
For the first 2 years, they produced simple chemicals for sale as needed by other businesses. Eventually, the new chemical company developed more sophisticated products consisting of soaps, detergents, and disinfectants, and germicidals and sanitary products to be sold to hospitals, various schools, nursing homes, and others.
1929 was the Great Depression, and that hit him as it did everybody else in this country. He lost every cent he had in the bank, and he had his accounts receivable from good customers who he trusted to pay him, and they did. And he had his brother working with him and his wife working with him, and they made it work. I'm sure it was not easy. I'm sure it was very tight.
Naturally, the depression worsened, and Frank and Sarah became almost penniless. Ferd and Mary had lost their new home and much of their furniture. They were able to move back to the girls' family home. In the following years, the two Narberga families became close socially on weekends and on holidays, such as Thanksgiving and Christmas. Ferd considered joining the Army. However, his departure would have jeopardized the survival of their company, and so he did not volunteer. Fortunately, the business actually grew during those war years. It became necessary for the plant to open on Saturdays to keep up with the orders. In his teen years, Fred worked with his father in the plant and learned much through his chores and experiences. Ferd Narberga shared with his brother in the development and the success of the company from its beginning in 1925 until his retirement more than 40 years later. Frank joined his father and uncle in the chemical business, and a few years later became the president of the company.
Benefit we had, we went through some hard years when we lost major customers or changes in business, which were substantial. We had a really strong asset base. We didn't have debt. We weren't leveraged or anything, and so we were able to withstand those kind of downturns and survive.
Frank Sr. remained chairman of the board. During the following quarter of the century, the company changed its name from Central Chemical Company to Central Solutions, and sales grew to a national level.
My father being just intensely passionate about sales. He was an instructor of instructors for Dale Carnegie course. We had a direct sales force. Everybody came into the business before me, my siblings, through sales. My aunt, Barbara, my dad's sister, married a man named Warren Moore. He became our plant manager, and as the company grew with direct sales, we became a regional force. My grandfather continued to work even after his wife, my grandmother, passed away in 1972.
Mr. Nabriga, of course, I'd never called him Frank in my life. It was Mr. Nabriga Jr. He was exactly that. He was a gentle giant. He commanded the room when you were with him, but he had a great sense of humor. My gosh, he was I don't know how many people know, he was, a clown for the Shriners for years and years. And he had a little of that in him whenever he saw you. No matter what he said, there was a little humor to go along with it. Even if he was, if he thought he needed a reprimand or question something you were doing out there, it always ended up humorous at the end. And I appreciated that and made it a lot easier on everybody.
Well, Senior was he was an awesome person. I mean, he had so much knowledge and had so much knowledge behind him that he, about chemicals and the things that they were doing and that type of thing. And it was a competitive industry, but at the same time, this was a family business. And so therefore, they would probably buy a little bit more product because we were a family organization rather than a big conglomerate.
There were these fire doors between this raw material storage room and manufacturing, and we were painting them orange. So I'm on my knees and I'm painting this door, and Senior comes by and he goes, "Hey Picasso, how you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing just great, got something to do here." And he was a pretty cool guy, pretty neat. I mean, I respected him a lot. And they asked if I wanted to work on the fill line for a while. And I said, sure, do that. And then, do you want to do manufacturing, blending? I said, sure, I'll do that. And it was just, I felt pretty lucky because it was like going to work with your best friends every day.
He was really intent. I want to go back home. And one more time, it's been 75 years since I came to the United States. And he wanted to see his mother's grave, where he was baptized, and where the church, as well as the baptistry font, which is still there. When he landed, I heard he said, "I made it." So I think he knew that time was getting short.
He died there about a mile from where he was born. So it really was the beginning and the end for him.
We wanted to have a family, and I couldn't raise a family in 400 a month. So I crawled back to my dad and said, "Can I get a job again?" My brother Mark was a year behind me, was getting out of school. And so we entered the company together as salesmen. He went to Colorado. I stayed in Kansas City, and we did direct sales because that's how you came into the company. Sales was golden. Initially, Mark and I were getting a lot of business seminars that were just how to run a small business. Actually, Dad turned it over to me first, and I did it for 4 or 5 years, and it was evident to me that Mark was a better person to run it, so I yielded it to him, and I figured I could be a good helper for that. So he and I worked together in that regard.
From what I've heard, when they were at sales conferences and booths, he wouldn't be at the booth. he'd be walking around the sales conference making contacts that way while Paul stood at the booth and manned it. And then my dad would come back every 30, 45 minutes from what I've heard the stories. And my dad would come back with samples or, hey, we should do this, we should be looking at this. So he was a great idea man. And then he'd be like, okay, here's the idea. He was, I think, the one that was most like sales like my great-grandfather was, if that makes sense. Yeah, he was very people-oriented. He would put them first before himself, which would sometimes be hindrance, but it worked to help grow the company, that's for sure.
Greg and Mark, those two were inseparable for many years. I mean, it's hard to think of one without the other.
And I remember my brother Mike once saying, you know, someday, as stressful as this is, someday we're going to look back and look at this time as the very best of the very best. And it was during that time frame that my brother Mark was diagnosed with cancer. Now, he was told 3 years, he made it 15 because he was such a warrior. And looking back now, Mike was spot on. If it wasn't for my brothers, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I wouldn't, in hindsight, have what I have. I don't think I would necessarily have my family. They certainly would not be in the position they're in. I owe them more than I could ever repay.
I think when I first came in, it was very much the four brothers, and I came in on the production side in the plant. I think we all worked, you know, in high school and college, summers in the plant. I remember working with Chris, my Uncle Chris, and then we've always been good with quality, with manufacturing, with formulation, but really I think sales was the big emphasis for a lot of years. And I mean, it's still very important, it still is to some degree, but I think that formulation, quality, production operations, those types of things have really drastically improved over the years to the point where we've gotten much more efficient.
Being sales-oriented is a wonderful thing, and yet the downside of that is there are other aspects of the business, manufacturing, blending, filling, R&D, QA, QC, that tend to get overshadowed and overlooked, along with many of the people who were engaged in those critical, fundamental activities that were just as important as everything else. For example, my Uncle D, who was perhaps the kindest man I've ever met. He was a lot of things that my grandfather and even my father were not. He was a dear man, and he was, in my opinion, an unsung hero at Central Solutions. And that is unfortunate, but I think it's important to acknowledge he was just as critical to this company as anyone else, including my grandfather. Another example would be my Uncle Warren, the plant manager. He ran our production plant for many, many years and did not get the attention that he deserved or that he earned.
During the summers of high school, for sure, is when I really kind of understood what the company did, what we made, how it works, kind of that led to, you know, a better understanding years later, you know, when working down here full time.
I stay here because of the stability, the loyalty, the support. I've had opportunities to go elsewhere, chose not to because I do enjoy what I do, mainly because I enjoy who I work with.
I've been working at Central Solutions coming up on 12 years. You know, I'm just blessed to have this job. The people that I work for are good people. I haven't worked for anyone that I've been able to feel like I'm family, and I feel family.
Yeah, I can honestly say I come into work each day excited, and it's not every day it's that way, but overall, I really do enjoy it. I wouldn't be here for 24 years otherwise.
It means a lot because it's a family atmosphere, you know. pretty much they let you do what you want to do as long as you do your job. That's the main thing. You take care of what you got to take care of.
I just want to thank all the Nabrigas, past and present. They were all very nice to me. Like I say, I was a kid in high school, a young man going to college, a man getting married and having a child. And I look at everything past. When I left here, I took a little of Central Chemical with me. That was the best thing I ever did for Central, was hiring Greg Kovac in 1983, I believe.
I think it's fantastic that this company has been in business for 100 years. You don't see that a lot, especially from a family-owned business. And they have done it the right way. They treat their people very well, and they're just a great family. And if you ever see them all together, you can just tell how much they care about one another. And that carries over to the employees here.
I feel like I owe it to Mike and Mark and Greg, particularly Mark, to set up their sons, my nephews, and my daughter, and future people who come along, to set them up with the same opportunities I was blessed with.
Integrity in the business, I'd say, is probably the biggest thing. Being honest and in integrity in how you treat people, employees, customers.
I want my children and grandchildren to work here, and I don't want them to feel the pressure to work here, but I want them to have the opportunity to work here.
I think all of us down here still want to grow the company. We're not settling to where we are right now.
When I think about carrying on the legacy, I think I'm just excited. I see all the old pictures of my uncles when they were younger, and it's interesting to think that that's me now, and then maybe in 40, 50 years, everything will look crazy old to us, and we'll be like, look how young I looked then, look how different we looked. I'm really excited for whatever legacy ends up looking like in the future.
When we were a small company, when there was, 12 people or 15 people that worked for it in total, and seeing the company now that's got, 115 people, it's really a good, you feel like maybe you were a little part of it. Maybe I helped a little bit.
The fact that we made it to the first 100 years, really incentivizes making it through the next 100 years. So it's the resilience and perseverance exhibited by, my father and my uncles and my grandfather and great-grandfather and great uncles that inspires me. They were all able to do it, and it's your duty and your responsibility to maintain and grow and protect.
I want to make sure we plant trees to provide shade, even though I won't be sitting under that tree. People that will follow me, just like the people that followed my grandfather and my father.
For sure, it's always been go where your passion leads you, and if that passion leads you to Central Solutions for whatever reason, then we're happy to have you. There's just no free lunch, you gotta work. And so there's a strong desire to see my kids work down here one day. I'd love to see that.
My great-grandmother, Henrietta, who I never met, of course, just see pictures. I've been to her grave many times. She wanted her two boys to become physicians in America. I don't know that she was committed to they must be physicians as much as what that represented to her success in helping people. In one sense, literally, with my Uncle Dee's son, Fred, becoming a physician at Mayo Clinic, and two of his boys becoming physicians, and they're practicing now up in Minnesota. On my branch of that tree, we started a medical company that provides products to especially seniors, but not exclusively. Our desire is to promote dignity and to alleviate suffering. Our products do both, and for people all across the country. And in fact, some of our products are used in healthcare institutions in Asia and in Europe. So that vision that she had has literally and figuratively happened. It was almost a pilgrimage, in a sense, a family pilgrimage. So it became, profoundly meaningful.
Working with family is not always the easiest thing, but being there in that moment was just a huge, wow, we're all on the same team. This is all for this. This is why we do this.
It's very special. And then to watch the sunset as a group, yeah, obviously it's something I'll never forget.
And that time on the beach, as it turns out, was a recommitment to ourselves, to my grandfather, to my dad, to Mark and Greg, and ultimately to each other, and to those who would follow us, that we were committed to making this work and to pouring ourselves into it with integrity and honesty and with a mind towards growing ourselves along with the company.
Well, everyone, here's to the last 100 years. And here's to the next 100 years. And let's have fun doing it.